You're like
Okay.
conjuring up the, oh, God. Oh,
All right, this is Senate Transportation Committee. It's Friday, February 23rd. We're going to talk about some flood recovery issues with our local town of Barre and how maybe Agency of Transportation could be helpful in the future. Take it away.
Thank you, Senator. And it's good to be here. I City Manager Barre, and just by way of context, we were, I know you all know, just very hard hit, and by the state's own metrics, the hardest hit community. We had 3,875 tons of debris removed. That's tons. We had the highest individual assistance count in the state. And the state did a survey about heat loss, and we were also, our residents were the hardest hit with heat loss. So those were the metrics they were using. And
heat loss being like number of
furnaces lost. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, so that was just the impact in our community. We've, approximately 350 structures damaged, and that's the whole gamut, right? Like that's a little bit of water in your basement, and also total losses. So we were right in the center of it. Our colleagues and friends in Montpelier were as well. And it was really two different events, and I always make sure to say, I'm not saying one flood was better or worse than the other, they were just different. And our friends in Montpelier got higher water. They had a lot of water on their first levels. We got lower water, but we got mud, right? And so neither of those is better, they're both bad. They're just different. And so we had a really labor intensive cleanup in Barre because the mud stayed back, and that required a lot of people shoveling it out, and our streets were covered in it, our sidewalks were covered in it. But I think the idea for me coming to this committee really started in testimony I gave at Senate Gov Ops, which one of the things that we think would be helpful for municipalities is sort of shared fleet because we have, just for example, we have one Vactor. In the back, there's a machine you may be familiar with. It cleans the storm drains. It has tons of uses, very helpful. We have one, and so that's a challenge when we're trying to be preemptive for events. So we actually had a really good test in this in December, because unfortunately we almost flooded again in December, and what turned out to be it was a really routine storm that ended up being really quite concerning and nearly as bad as we were a few inches or a few hours of rain from flooding again. Ahead of that storm, we had started doing our prevention, and that was to go clean storm drains, but we only have the one machine. And so one of the things I talked about with Senate Gov Ops is, look, if we can't afford to, we don't have a real day-to-day use for two, but if the state had one in the garage in Berlin, and we could call the state and say, hey, we'd like to prepare for the storm.
We asked them about that.
Yeah, and so we would, those are the kinds of tangible things that AOT could do to help municipalities, and it would be spread across not just Barre. It would help, certainly people in this region, and if the state deployed them strategically, those would be things that would help everybody. So what I've done, I've talked to my public works department, and I just have pictures. I'm happy to send this to the committee so they can be used later. This is just from our public works department, examples of the types of machines that we don't own in the city. I doubt many municipalities own them because they don't have a lot of day-to-day use, but they have a lot of high impact value when you do need one. So a long reach excavator, this is important for, as an example, we have a railroad trestle in Barre that acts as a debris catcher, which is very problematic, and was your colleague Peter Anthony's house was directly impacted by this trestle.
That's the one he wants removed.
That's the one he wants removed, yeah. And so we don't have any machines. First of all, the city's not responsible for maintaining them, but even though we're not, we recognize the danger. If we had a long reach excavator and we saw debris there, we would go and clean it. We don't have one. They're hard to get. They don't have a lot of day-to-day uses for municipalities. If the state had these deployed regionally, that would be something that would help us with flood prevention. That trestle is a danger. Now, obviously, the trestle's gone. That's less of a problem. But
the trestle is gone.
If it is gone,
Oh.
if it is removed, we're in.
Thinking maybe the flood took care of.
No, we were hoping.
It's a trestle bridge for an old train.
Yeah.
Trains used to go to a granite shed, but the granite shed is no longer
They don't use
using it, so the it's just a trestle.
And the trestle's been compromised for almost a decade now plus, and so it's really just as it acts for is a debris catcher. So this is an example. That long reach excavator is an example and a use that we at Barrie would have for it. I'm sure other municipalities would as well. The underbridge boom lift. So this is we have many bridges with crossing Stevens Branch. I know Montpelier has this issue as well. And we still have debris under our Berlin Street Bridge from July because we don't have, and the state doesn't have sort of the equipment to get under there to clean it.
This Newport truck, or is that only for taking pictures?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So and this was an issue in December for us because the Berlin Street Bridge with that debris still stuck under it, that's the pinch point we were watching closely. And if that had started to back up, that's when we would have had more flooding in December. But this is an example, and I'm not saying this looks like a very large machine, but we need something, and I know Montpelier still has this here. If you look under their bridges, they still have debris there. And that's another flood waiting to happen. I mean, we can't send people under there. We don't have anything remotely close to being able to get under there. This would be very important to help us keep bridges clear and to prevent and to mitigate the impacts of flood events or high water events. The Vector truck I mentioned, I think that's an easy one. I know there's a lot of municipalities don't have them. So this could be a real value to many places. We use this a lot, as I said, in preparation for flood events to clean drains. We would love to have access to 2 or 3 of these. What we learned during the flood is that the municipal mutual assistance network is great. I know we had South Burlington sent over equipment, Burlington sent over equipment, St. Jay's sent over equipment. I mean, it was just it's a good network. We can't rely on it because municipalities need their equipment as well. So having access to these types of Vector machine for us in Barrie and for other municipalities would be essential to help us prepare for these types of events. The leaf vacuum, again, this is just because what it obstructs storm drains is leaks, right? And so these are examples of kinds of machines that our public works department has identified as we don't have the day-to-day use. We also don't have at this point the resources to invest in these machines because the financial situation we're facing, we're deferring, fire trucks and police cruisers. So these are, they're kind of luxuries at this point. But again, if there was a strategic deployment of these where we could share them with other municipalities, they would have value not just to Barrie, not just for flood mitigation, but this that had value as municipal services, like even the leak vacuum, right? Like it helps us prevent floods by keeping junk out of storm drains, but it also provides a yard waste service to governments can provide that they're not providing today. So that's what we love to see something like this. I think that as I talk to my fellow managers, we're constantly brainstorming how to share services. Share services is the hardest thing to do in all levels of government. I get that, and we do a really good job, and we have really good mutual aid networks. But at some point, we need something more, accessible, reliable, right? Because we can't depend on South Burlington sending us equipment because they need it as well. So that's what we'd love to see, something like this. This would be a real tangible benefit, I think, to many municipalities. It would, share the cost at the state level because we just can't afford the Vector truck, for example, is in the $700,000 range. We bought it with a grant, and I know a lot of places aren't in a position to do that, even in the best of finances. So.
It makes perfect sense to me. These are the types of investments we need to make to adapt to our changing climate because it's just a reality that we're going to see more heavy torrential rains. The questions I have is, I think I heard you say you want one for this garage here, but how deployable, shareable are these? And did you make this request to the administration prior to the budget, the governor's budget recommend, or is this all more recent evolving conversation?
This came through, at least from our side, it came through in that Senate GovOps testimony that happened in January. So we didn't make a specific request of the administration for this. And I gave the Berlin garage as an example. I think that, I know AOT has regional garages. I think that there would be a value regionally for machines like this. These can travel. I know we got equipment from as far away as Rutland, right? So these machines I know can be deployed and moved. And I think if we're if we're all strategic about knowing what the forecasts are, I don't think you need all that many. You don't need one in every region, but having enough to, a small fleet to be able to deploy in places like Rutland or Barrie, Montpelier, or Burlington, wherever they're needed. I don't think you need one in every corner necessarily.
I don't know if you said this, I apologize if you do. Does the state own any of these now, or are these just municipally owned?
I did ask AOT, and I think they said they only have one Vector truck, so they don't really deal with greens as
Right,
much as
exactly.
municipalities, and they said it's an old one,
Yeah.
so it'd be more, my guess is they don't.
I don't believe they own any of the others.
Vacuum, they might have a boom lift and a long reach excavator, but you probably need a special operator that knows.
Yes.
how
That's
to
what I was
use
gonna
it.
ask, when you do borrow, do they set an operator?
So when we had the mutual assistance, yes, they all came with operators. Yeah. So, and those were pretty standard. That was pretty standard equipment. So we were getting a street sweeper from Burlington that came with an operator. We got our Vector from either St. Albans or St. Jay's, and they sent an operator as well.
Yeah.
But we could, if we, for many of these, like we would have, we can operate a Vector on our own, right? So if the state had one parked in Berlin, we have guys in DPW, multiple guys in DPW who are trained to operate it, so we could run it ourselves. And leaf vacuum too, that's a machine that our CDL drivers can handle. The excavators, I believe our staff can handle as well, but the underbridge boom lift is, I think, is an open question. I think they could certainly be the staff that's cleaning underneath. I don't know if they can be the ones moving it.
What was the municipal assistance program? Is it an actual program? or-
No, it's just sort of a mutual aid. It's the network of managers. So it's informal. Yeah, it's very informal. What happened after the flood was people saw the pictures and we started getting calls. We got calls from Mayor Burlington, from manager of South Burlington, other managers that we just work with. They saw the need and they reached out. Yeah, so it's not an official program, or it's just our professional.
And it's not one that AOT participates in now, like
They weren't part of that,
Right.
certainly, no.
I feel increasingly compelled to say I represent 11 communities. South Burlington is just one of them.
Yes.
South Burlington.
Well, but your generosity.
Yes. Well, and Jesse's a former resident of the region, so I know it has a special place in her heart, I'm sure.
I'm glad they could help.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think it makes sense. I mean, one of the things when we talked about AOT, we didn't have this. I just knew there was equipment, and maybe the Vector truck was the only one I had remembered.
That's a very tangible one, and that one probably has the greatest direct impact, because that's sucking up the storm drains, and
then it stores it, and then what do you do with it?
so it stores it, and then it captures water and debris in tanks, and then we have places where we as a municipality can drop off the debris and the water. So if it's dirty water, it goes to our wastewater treatment facility, and that's what most of it is at this point. And then we have a yard waste location where we would drop off whatever's picked up. Yeah. So that's probably the most tangible one for municipalities, and it's a machine that is pretty standard certification that, like I said, we have multiple people who can operate it in Barrie.
Okay, well, we'll bring this up again with AOT as we look at their budget and how they can be more helpful. Maybe.
Yes.
Did the House do anything with this? You can see the T-bill.
I don't think so. No. I think it came out of this testimony that when people went to tour Barrie and they were talking about what do you need, how could we do better for the next flood, this came up.
Gotcha.
And I think they do have this thing called the snooper truck, because I remember, but maybe it's only for taking, for only inspecting. But also when they do the underbridge washing, I thought they had something like this, because they have to wash underneath the bridges to prevent rust. But they probably covet them,
I'm sure.
they probably own, they're using it in the summer when
Considering
they have like whatever,
it'll be out
2,000
of,
bridges to
Yeah.
walk. But if there's a way that we could get one that it can help towns.
Right, if it could be dedicated for town use, and then they would have one when it's not being used by a town, like these are machines that, certainly, like I said, we get by with a Vector today with one. The long reach excavator would be for really extreme circumstances. These would be assets for AOT much of the time, right? And then the other times when they're needed by municipalities, they would be there, we wouldn't have the scramble. And we would have the capacity to better prepare for
And
these
if that
events.
helps to have lessen the damage, it could be a money.
Absolutely.
These aren't for rent for many companies out there, so this is.
Imagine they are, just like, remember, we asked about the railroad repair and the track, and they actually had to bring in a company that specializes, remember, and brought in the equipment that was necessary. Because they had the big trucks that were on, rail, you know, the wheels, rail wheels.
And I heard from my DPW staff that, as an example, the long reach excavator in particular is hard to rent because even private contractors don't have a great use for them.
Yeah.
They're very, you can do most of what you can do with just a normal excavator. And this came up because we had a public meeting on the trestle removal last night. And when we flagged for the state and the railroad that the trestle is becoming blocked with debris, they have to find a long reach excavator and they struggle. And so there's been instances where we're waiting days for this debris to be moved. Now, we've been okay, but if there's a flood event and there's debris there, that's problematic for our community. So again, these are, you know, that one in particular, I know is hard to, and the local contractor that we had used has stopped carrying it because they couldn't get any rental value out of it either.
Great, that's helpful to have the
Yes,
specifics.
pleasure to meet you.
Thank you,
Yeah.
appreciate it, thank you.
All right, we have a little time.
Okay, I'll run in and you can